Good morning, everyone. Hello from Texas Healthcare Trustees. My name is Amy Eskew, President and CEO of THT. I am happy to be joined once again by Cesar Lopez, Associate General Counsel of the Texas Hospital Association. If you recall, we are doing our monthly check-ins with Cesar to discuss all things legislative session, and I know there has been a lot of activity going on, and we really appreciate Cesar being here this morning in between hearings and all the testimony you've been doing. So thank you, Cesar, for joining us. Just starting off very high level, I know since we last talked in March, there's been a lot of changes. The bill deadline has been passed, which means there's lots of amendments floating around to things. So can we start off, just give us sort of the highs and lows that THA has seen over the last month or so?
Yeah, happy to. And again, happy to be back with everybody. Hopefully these continue to be educational and useful to all. As always, I'll say this at the end as well. Please feel free to reach out to both of us if you guys have any questions or want to talk about any of these bills or issues any further. So highlights and lowlights, I guess, for the last month. You mentioned the bill filing deadline, which we talked about last month. Before the deadline actually hit, it was as crazy as I think we were expecting it to be. Now that you mention it, we hit a new record in the number of total bills filed for any given legislative session. I think the House bill numbers actually got into the 5,000 range. So five, whatever it may be, I think maybe 530, 540, or 5,400, excuse me, 5,400 a bill, something like that. I don't think, or at least what I heard at the Capitol when I went over to some of these offices, is they never broke into the fives before. It was always 4,000, some 4,800, 4,900, something like that. So I think total number of bills filed was pushing 9,000 when you factor in the Senate bills with the House bills. Again, that's just an incredible amount of bills that were filed. But remember, we talked about this last time, a lot of those bills came at the very beginning. So when the bill filing opened up in November, a week or two after the elections, there was this huge wave, this huge glut of bills that hit that, again, had probably never happened before, certainly hadn't happened in some time. And then again, as you might imagine, at the very end there was another glut of bills that was filed at the very end. A lot of times folks will do that on purpose. You file a bill at the beginning, at the bill opening, the bill filing opening, to be the first out of the gate, to grab those headlines to get the attention, and then you file bills at the very end, at the deadline, to try to sneak them by and get them in unnoticed. So yeah, a high number of bills were filed this session. Again, we generally read all of them. I mean, I know that's a pretty broad statement, but we do read all of them to make sure they are or not applicable to hospitals, and then we kind of take it from there. I don't know the number of total bills that we have sort of been following, or at least highlighted for THA as THA concerns. It's usually in the 1,500 range. I'm going to assume that number is going to be higher this session, but once we do get those final figures in, I'll make sure to share those with you guys. But yes, it has been a very, very, very interesting session so far. We're a little more than halfway through as we sit here today, April 14th. If any of you all went to any presentations that I gave in the lead up to session, last fall, last winter, I am on record at several of these public presentations of saying that I have never had a sense of dread the way that I've had in the lead up to this legislative session, because we expected it to be just crazy. We expected it to be bad in all sorts of ways, and it has been. And it's not really for the things that we thought it was going to be. I know a lot of folks last year were very concerned about reproductive care, abortion type issues. That certainly held a lot of folks' attention after the Dobbs decision, sort of the leaked opinion and the actual opinion through the summer, through the fall, and the fallout from that. That really hasn't been an issue at the Capitol. We talked about this last month. There is really no momentum to try to fix those issues. There hasn't really been any momentum to introduce any bills. It's just nobody's doing anything on it. What has been a concern is this sort of broad-based pushback. I don't want to say global, but very broad pushback on healthcare, on physicians, on the sort of day-to-day things that we as an industry do for patients and for the general public. This pushback on public health initiatives. I'm sure all of it is pretty heavily related to COVID and sort of the blowback from the pandemic and the shutdowns and the masking requirements and all that sort of thing. But it really is a situation where the pendulum has swung entirely in the other direction. And there's just this huge wave of anti-hospital, anti-healthcare, anti-physician, pro-patient in the sense of patients should be able to come into a hospital and dictate exactly the type of care they get, exactly the type of drugs they get, override physicians, medical judgment, that sort of thing. And we have been dealing with that all over the place at the Capitol. It's things like public health related issues. There's a number of bills that were filed. And again, we talked about some of these last go around, but where there would be that patient's bill of rights, so to speak, where the patient could come in and dictate their care. Potential bans on masking in hospitals for any communicable disease, not just limited to COVID. The inability for hospitals and physicians to differentiate their care for patients based on that patient's vaccination status. So again, the idea being that a patient could decline to take the flu vaccine or the COVID vaccine or whatever other vaccine is out there, and that doctor, that pediatrician, if it's a child, or that doctor or that hospital couldn't have that patient come into the facility and say, no, you know what, we're going to keep you out of this, the cancer ward or the transplant, ward or whatever it may be, where you might have immunocompromised patients. So those kinds of bills have been major issues for us, and we have been spending unfortunately, an inordinate amount of time fighting those issues that we really shouldn't have to be fighting. And so it's sort of silly in the sense that we're dealing with that and not really moving the ball on issues that matter. But again, that's where we are this session, and it's unfortunate that we're there.
Yeah, and that's interesting and really good information to know. I know hospitals have been reeling from the financial impact of COVID, so it's really interesting now we're seeing the political impact from COVID.
Yeah.
So I know you put together some handouts for us today. Really appreciate that. So will you walk us through, just give us an overview of those kind of key bills that the Texas Hospital Association is monitoring right now that trustees may need to be aware of?
Sure. And so this is pulled almost entirely from our top 10 bills that our communications team put out this week. And so there'll be more of this. I really do have to say that our communications team, our advocacy team, has done a great job of keeping the membership informed. So this stuff is out there. It's on the THA website. We can get this information to folks very easily. But yeah, so just to run through a couple of the bills that we have highlighted, and again, this is a very small sample of all the stuff that we've been either working for positively or negatively, but bills like HB 12, this is a huge issue for us. It always has been a huge issue for us in extending that postpartum Medicaid coverage for new mothers. We have been trying for a number of sessions now to get that extended to 12 months. We continue to try that. We continue to build momentum for that. I think this year we're going to get really, really close if we don't get all the way to the finish line. But again, any progress is going to be helpful in this issue. Then you have a bill like HB 49, which is another issue that we have worked on now for 2 or 3 sessions, and a bill that I testified on the first week of actual hearings. Basically working hand in hand with the commission, working hand in hand with the bill author, Representative Click. Again, this is the second session that maybe third, that we worked with her office on this bill. But just making sure that we have the appropriate amount of transparency in those reports with the commission when those investigations take place. And at the end of those investigations, that there's something that is made public and available to the general public. The concern that we have, a lot of folks will ask, well, why do you want to do something like that? Well, the concern that we have is right now, nothing is able to be produced as a result of these investigations. And so it looks problematic on our end where, hey, a hospital may have been investigated, but there's nothing publicly available after that investigation wraps. We don't like that. The public doesn't like that. The legislators don't like that. So this is basically as much of a win-win-win as possible if we can get this one all the way to the finish line. HB 1236, another bill that I testified on a couple of weeks ago now, another bill that we have worked on now for 2 or 3 sessions with the bill's author. This is one of those bills where it's kind of the hospitals and doctors versus the health plans, sort of that classic battle. And if you go back and watch his testimony, that's exactly what it was, is the health plans basically go up and say, no, we don't like this prudent layperson standard that we use for emergency care. The idea there being that if somebody comes into an ER thinking that they're having a heart attack or something like that, and ends up being, indigestion or something, much, much, much less serious, you still want that patient, that individual, to come in with those concerns that they're having an emergency. And then, as we do in the healthcare industry, we start with the worst case scenario and then work our way backwards. So again, using that example, somebody comes in, they're thinking they're having a heart attack, but it's just, indigestion. You want them to come in and seek that care, because in the event that it could have been a heart attack, you want to be able to rule that out. But it doesn't mean that the ER, the physicians, the staff doesn't do the work. They go through, they run the tests, they rule out, worst case scenario and work backwards, and they should be paid for that. That's our position. So we want to make sure that that prudent layperson, if somebody came in with the symptoms that they had at the time that they presented to the ER, to the ED, would a prudent layperson believe that they were suffering from an emergency? That's the bill in a nutshell. So again, that is a battle between the health plans, who don't want to pay for all that care and all that sort of work that the ED staff does in ruling out that emergency, and they would rather pay for the final diagnosis. So instead of coming in thinking they have a heart attack and ruling that out, they want to pay for the ultimate indigestion and whatever the lesser amount of that cost would be. So again, that's just kind of an interesting, maybe potentially even fun one that we have been working on. Another bill that is of great interest to us and several of our hospitals that have been successful in using the hospital at home program, HB 1890. Those hospital at home programs were tied to the federal public health emergency. Of course, we know that that is going to expire here in the next couple of months. In fact, President Biden signed a resolution just this week to that effect. So the end of that federal PHE is forthcoming. But again, a lot of our hospitals, several of our hospitals really enjoyed and really used that hospital at home program to great effect. They would like to keep doing that. So we worked in conjunction with the state to make sure that we could set up a mechanism and a scheme to keep that program alive. This bill is just one piece of that larger scheme to allow hospitals to continue that hospital at home program. So I know a number of our viewers are going to be at facilities that utilize that program. And so this bill is really key in allowing them to continue that. I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll move through the rest of these pretty quickly. HB 2337, again, dealing with Medicaid payment, state level payment for certain hospitalization services, outpatient therapy, behavioral health. Again, these behavioral health issues have become much more of a focus for us here at THA, as they become much more of a focus for our hospital members and the populace at large. So that, again, is another one of our initiatives in that space to try to make sure that we continue to provide that care. Oh, I think I doubled up here. Sorry. Moving to the next slide. HB 3504, again, another bill that is heavily involved or heavily in the behavioral health space. This has to do with those emergency detention warrants that many of our hospitals do utilize when somebody who's coming in suffering from a behavioral health event, needing that kind of behavioral health care. This is an issue that I worked on when I first started at THA, and then either thankfully or not had to hand it over to Steve, my boss, to take over, because these behavioral health issues, I mean, they're always there. They've always been an issue for our hospital. They, for the 7 years I've been at THA, have been a major concern for us. So again, 3504, House Bill 3504 is another one of those where we have made great strides in pushing this issue forward. Whether or not we get this one across the finish line, it's still good to know that we're advancing in the right direction there, and that people are really starting to pay attention to these issues and how to solve them. Moving now to the Senate bills, SB 240, pretty straightforward workplace violence prevention bill. This again is another major issue for us here at THA. Of course, we want to make sure that our staff is safe and has a safe workplace environment. We work very closely with folks like the Texas Medical Association, the Texas Nurses Association on these types of bills. So again, this is another bill that we like to sort of tout and pat ourselves on the back for continuing to move these issues forward. SB 25 workforce as a workforce bill. Loan repayment is a very useful tool that the healthcare industry can use to entice folks to work in the more rural areas, and in this case, encourage folks to come back into the nursing field and sort of seek out that career. So hopefully a pretty straightforward bill there that would encourage that loan repayment assistance for nurses, and to encourage. Of course, we know we have a workforce shortage specific to nurses and others, but I think nurses get the most of the spotlight on that issue. So again, this is in response to that and trying to find some resolution there. SB 1433, again, going back to those behavioral health emergency detention orders. This is another way that we're trying to create efficiency within that process and utilize electronic submissions, judges that now can appear and feel comfortable appearing via Zoom, that sort of thing. This just is in that vein and trying to move that issue again further and create more efficiencies for us there. So that was my quick run through of the 8 or 9 or 10 bills that we've really been focusing on here over the last couple of weeks. Again, there's a lot more out there. So if you guys have a bill that you're particularly concerned about, again, I mentioned this at the beginning and I promise I do it here at the end, please give us a call, shoot me an email. Let me know what is keeping you up at night, and I'm happy to have that discussion or connect you with somebody here at THA that has more expertise on that than I do. But we want to make sure that you guys are getting the information you need. As I am oft to say, you all are our eyes and ears, and if we don't know that it's happening, if you guys aren't informing us of things and concerns and those sorts of things, we don't know they exist. So your feedback is absolutely valuable to us, and we really enjoy that. I personally really enjoy that part of the gig where I get to connect with you guys and talk about the issues and things that are concerning you. So Amy, I'll stop there and happy to take any questions or anything that you think I might have missed.
Yeah, well, one question I have, and I'm actually not sure of the current status of this bill because it's kind of come and gone and come back again from what I understand, but the outpatient facility fee proposal to get rid of those facility fees, essentially. 2 questions on that. One is, what is the status of that? And the second one is it clear if that would have any bearing on the new rural emergency hospital designation? I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so good questions. I can almost guarantee you that we're going to spend a good chunk of the next month video talking about that issue. That has really flared up here in the last week or two. It is a problem. That goes back to the sort of craziness that we started off this session talking about, and just that sort of anti-hospital, hey, you guys must be doing something wrong, type of things that scenarios that we're walking into, arguments that we're walking into at the Capitol. There is this belief that hospitals are out there charging these facility fees as nothing more than a means to just generate extra income, that they're not tied to anything, that there's no value sort of behind it, that we're just out there tacking on facility fees because we can, and it's just more money for us to make without providing additional services. We know that's not true, but we still have to convince folks that are dead set against that, that line of thinking, that is the case. So our advocacy team has done an incredible job in pushing back on those bills. There's 2 bills, a House bill and a Senate bill. The House bill actually was pulled down from its hearing sort of at a deadline to do that, just before the hearing was actually held. The author has given us a couple of weeks to come back with proposals to try to make this better. Our hope is that we can turn this from a bill that would limit or eliminate the ability to charge those facility fees, again, which hospitals are dependent on, into a bill that would call for a study in the interim. So we'd spend the next 2 years working on a study with the commission, with the legislators, with the state, to just figure out, hey, let's get a better understanding out there that folks can really understand what these fees, why they exist and what they do. And, if there is any wiggle room and something we can do there, let's try to figure that out in the interim rather than trying to cram something through in a couple of weeks and have that, fight at the Capitol during the 140 days that we have every 2 years, our legislative session. So we're hopeful that we can get to that point where it's less of a threat and more of a, okay, we know this is a problem. We know even if it's just from a PR issue, we need to do something, but let's get some time and do something there. Will it affect the federal designation? I don't think so. The discussions that we've been having with our folks, our trusted advisors, our members, our hospital members and the staff within those hospitals that know this stuff better than we do. The facility fee is called for under CMS. I mean, CMS does allow us to charge a facility fee. In fact, it's oftentimes the only fee that the hospital itself can charge under Medicare or Medicaid. And so if there's going to be any conflict, again, this is Law School 101, something easy for me, of course, to sort of speak on, but there's a supremacy clause in the US Constitution. And so if there's a federal rule that conflicts with a state rule or state law, state regulation, the federal rule is going to control. It's going to have supremacy over the state regulation. So if you have a situation where the federal rule allows for that facility fee to be charged and collected, but the state law says, no, we can't, we're going to take the opposite position. There's a conflict there. And in those situations, the federal requirements should control. Again, we're not in that situation yet. We don't have to have that fight yet, but that's basically it in a nutshell, that if we can do it under federal law, we should continue to be allowed to do so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I think we're at or over time, but again, a lot of really good information. I know we could probably do a 2-hour session on this. So once again, really appreciate you, Cesar, for joining us today. I highly encourage everyone watching this video and check out the link below in the newsletter to visit tha.org. There are so many resources on there, from audio and video of the hearings to white papers. If you want to engage with your legislator, which we're getting to crunch time now on that. So Cesar, I know the end of session is at the end of May, which sounds far away, but I know those of you who are working on it every single day, it's still quite a ways to go. So what do you expect for the next, I guess, 6 weeks or so?
So we have probably 3 or 4 more weeks of hearings. And so again, those are wild cards. Anything could happen at those hearings. Anything can still be said. And then the middle 2 weeks of May are kind of these mad rushes to get the bills that have gone out of hearing, gone to the House floor, the Senate floor, and just basically get them moved. So those are the really, really kind of interesting points in session when we're here working sometimes weekends, late into the weekends, because they're over there meeting on the floor during the weekend and working on amendments and stuff like that. So it's kind of a mad scramble through mid to late mid-May. And then the last week of session is basically, we know we're nearing the end and it kind of starts to slow down. We have not heard anything regarding a special session, thankfully. So that's another sort of wild card that's out there, but I don't think we'll have any clarity on that until probably mid-May. So definitely a lot more to talk about when we meet again next month. And probably the month after that. So a lot more to come.
Great. Well, again, visit tht.org, tha.org. We'll do our May check-in with Cesar, kind of check in on how he's doing. And we'll also do, of course, an end of session wrap up as well. So thank you again, Cesar, and we will talk to you next month.
Yep. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.